So I recently got this new titanium bike. It's a Clydesdale. Clydesdale is made by Zinn um, Bikes. They're based out of Boulder. They make bikes for big and tall people, but it's a titanium bike. And one thing I wanted to do when I got it was combine some of my auto detailing experience as well as the titanium bike and actually do what's called a ceramic coat on it. So if you've never heard of ceramic coating, it comes in a little bottle like this. It's mainly designed for cars, but it'll last you a couple of years on a car. I'm told it'll last probably a little less on a bike just because it's bare metal and there's not a lot of paint on the surface. But what it does, it kind of acts like a protection layer. It's going to make your bike easier to clean, and it's going to make so water repels off it a lot easier and dirt and things don't stick to it as much. It kind of just creates an invisible layer on the bike. So a lot of people will put this on high-end sports cars and things like that because it'll keep it clean for longer, and it'll make it easier to clean when it does get dirty. So it also will do very minimal protection as far as keeping scratches and so forth off the bike. If it's going to get scratched, it's going to get scratched, but it'll do a little bit of protection there for you. So I've never actually done titanium before, so I kind of wanted to walk through the process, and hopefully it's going to turn out good. So the first thing I'm going to do, obviously, with this bike in order to ceramic coat it is I'm going to get it really, really clean. Now, I've only had this bike for a couple weeks, and I've only ridden it a couple times and only once in the rain. So it's already pretty clean, but in order to get all the nooks and crannies as best as I possibly can, I'm going to take everything off it. So I've already taken off the bottle mounts. I've taken off the all the electronics. Basically, for right now, I'm mostly worried about the frame because that's what I'm going to be working on today. But if there's anything that you can take off, certainly you'll want to. If you have the ability to do this before you install all the gears and the wheels and everything, it would certainly save a lot of time. As it is now, there's some things I'm just not going to bother taking off because it's going to be too time consuming, and I'm a little worried that if I take something off and I can't get it put back on right, it's going to affect my ability to use the bike until I can get it fixed. So I'm going to leave the gears on. I'm going to take both wheels and tires off, but everything else is going to come off. Now, one of the cool things that they were showing me about this titanium is it's bare metal. They do come with a slight coating on it when you get it new, but that coating isn't designed to last forever, and so that's really where the ceramic coating is going to come in. One of the cool things they showed me is that the titanium has the ability to get out scratches pretty easily. So if I were doing a car, one of the first things I would want to do is I'd want to give it a good polish and paint correction. So I would actually probably start by doing a really thorough wash on it, and then I would actually do what's called a clay bar treatment. The clay bar is a little piece of kind of like silly putty that you rub across the surface that gets out those embedded contaminants to get it as clean as you possibly can. Now, because this bike is so new and because it really shouldn't have any embedded components in the titanium, I'm not going to worry about the clay bar for now. So I'm going to skip probably right on to the next few steps. So again, if it were a car, I'd probably do the clay bar, and then I would polish it and maybe compound and polish it depending on what type of surface scratches we were dealing with. But in this case, the scratches can actually be buffed out with a piece of rough, the name escapes me at the moment, but I'll show you what it is. So I've got a few little scratches in here from where I installed a bike lock that I was using, and they're not bad, they're not permanent, you probably wouldn't even notice it, but if I'm going to be putting on the ceramic coating, I want it to look as perfect as I can get it before I do that. So that's going to be one of the first things I'm going to do is work on any of the scratches to get those out of there that I can. One thing about this ceramic coating is that the bottle that it comes in, this is a 60 milliliter bottle. This is way more than you will need for a bike. This is not designed for a bike. This is designed for a car. And even for cars, you should be able to take a bottle like this and do like 2 to 3 cars or one really big truck. But it goes a long way, and you'll find that I'll probably end up using maybe 10% of it, maybe 20% of it on the bike, if that, because it doesn't take a whole lot. The other thing is that it doesn't really benefit you to do multiple coats. So you're not gonna make it last longer or make it work better by doing 2 or 3 coats. You're really just gonna wanna do one coat of the ceramic coating on this, on the bike. If you have a painted bike that's like an actual paint with clear coat, then it's much the same process, except you may want to do a little polishing on it to get out any surface scratches beforehand, and to make it look its best. Because think of it this way, once you put the ceramic coating on, whatever the bike looks like right now is probably what it's going to look like to some degree until the ceramic coating wears off, and that may be quite a while from now. So you want to get it looking as good as it can. I'm also going to do a metal polish on it, just to kind of get off any oxidation and to even out the surface of it. Kind of like if I was working on a set of wheels or tires, I would probably do a little polish on it first, just to get it looking really nice and sharp before I actually did the work. And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So the next step is I'm gonna take off the wheels and tires. I'm gonna do a little cleaning of the ins and outs of the pieces in here that I can get to. Some of the pieces I'm just not gonna be able to get to without actually fully disassembling the bike, but I'm not really prepared to do that at this point. So we'll have to get it the best we can. So all right, so now that I got that one scratch out that I was really worried about, and now that I've gotten all the tires and wheels off, the next step is going to be to give it a cleaning as best I can. So I'm just going to do it by hand, using a detail spray that I use on cars, and that should work fine. It's not going to get it perfect. I'm going to follow up with a polish after. So now that I got it pretty clean, I'm going to do a metal polish, and this is going to take off some of the oxidation that exists on it. There shouldn't really be much, but I did a little spot up here just as kind of a test, and you can see I got a fair amount of oxidation off there. So I'm not going to get it perfect, but I am going to try and get it pretty smooth throughout, and that way when I apply the ceramic, it's going to look as good as possible. So for this, I'm just using a regular microfiber. If I were doing this with a car, I'd actually probably be using a buffer, but the area is really small and I really don't have that much to do on here. And the buffer wouldn't really give me a whole lot of advantage because it would have so much movement and the surface area is really not that large. So next step, I'm going to do a little polish on it, and then we'll get to the coating. So now that I've got the polish off there, the next step I'm going to give it another look over. I've cleaned off all the polish, but I'm going to do one final step, which is surface prep. Any ceramic product that you use is probably going to have a good surface prep that comes with it. And basically it's just an isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol mixture, and it's going to take any of the oils and fine contaminants off before you actually apply the ceramic, and make sure that the ceramic can adhere to the metal and not adhere to the other stuff that you've got on the frame still, even after all the cleaning. So I'm going to do that, wipe off with a brand new towel, make sure I get it as clean as I can, and then we'll start on the ceramic. So now that I've got the surface all surface prepped with that isopropyl alcohol mixture, I'm ready to actually start applying the ceramic. Now, a few thoughts on this. This is the graphene ceramic coating. It's from Adams Polishes. They're based in Colorado. I've been using Adams Polishes for 20 years. They don't sponsor me, but I've known Adam going back to about 2000, 2001. Great guy, great company, great reputation. There are other brands that make ceramic coating as well, and I'm sure they're just fine. I've had the most experience with the graphene ceramic coating from Adams, and so that's what I'm going to be using, but you're welcome to use whatever brand, and obviously I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. When I'm applying this, I'm going to be wearing gloves. It's not necessarily hazardous or anything to your skin, but it does leave a bit of a purple hue. There's a UV tracer in it that will turn your hands purple if you're not careful with it. The other thing is that once I apply it to the metal, so I'm going to put it on the little applying sponge here that Adams makes. This is a suede applying sponge. I'm going to put it on there. I'm not going to rub it off right away. I'm going to try and wait for what is called flashing. So when you put the ceramic coating on there, it's going to lay the ceramic down, and then it's going to take a few minutes for that ceramic to actually start to adhere. And I might be able to see on this metal, it's a little hard, it's easier on darker paint, but you can actually see like a rainbow effect when it starts to come up, the oil starts to separate from the ceramic, and the oil is what you're actually going to be wiping off. So once you see that rainbow, or after a couple of minutes if you can't, you might be able to touch it and feel that it's a little tacky. That's usually a good indicator that it's able to get it off the surface. If you don't get that oil off the top after it's cured, it's going to leave what are called high spots. And high spots are basically parts of the ceramic coating that are not desirable, that are not see-through, and they're going to be kind of a pain to get off. You're usually going to have to, depending on how long it takes before you notice it, you're either going to have to try to apply more ceramic coating and use that to rehydrate it and then take off the high spots, or you might actually have to use some polish to get off the high spots after the fact. But what you're getting off at that point is the oil, not the ceramic. So keep that in mind. Also, the bottle has a top on it, and you always want to make sure that as soon as you put some on your applicator, you put that top back on. You don't want this to get too much exposure to oxygen. And actually, once I'm done with this ceramic coating, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put like a bit of saran wrap on top of it, and I'm probably going to put this in the refrigerator just so it doesn't get any unnecessary exposure to oxygen. Otherwise, the ceramic will actually crystallize in the bottle, and then it won't be much good, and you'll have to toss the rest. But otherwise, the stuff in the bottle will probably last another year or two, and so I can continue to use it on other bikes, I can use it on other cars, etc. Because these bottles aren't cheap. They're small, but this one I think is about 80 bucks. So you want to just use caution with that. Otherwise, like I said, I'm going to wear gloves. I'm going to apply it. This ceramic coating actually has what's called a UV tracer in it. So once I'm done and I've wiped out the high spots, I actually can break out a black light, and that black light I can shine on the surface in the dark, and any parts that have the ceramic coating applied are actually going to glow, kind of a purplish color. That's what turns your fingers purple. And I'll be able to tell if I missed any spots, if I need to come back and apply any spots any thicker, etc. And so it's a good way of knowing, because it's not necessarily easy to tell otherwise that you've actually applied it. So I'm going to put on my gloves here. When you're a big and tall guy, they usually don't make gloves your size, and that's true for me as well. These are the biggest gloves I could find, but if anyone knows of any glove companies that make XXX or quadruple X rubber gloves, certainly let me know. All right, other thing is you're gonna wanna shake this every time you use it, because there's actually bits of graphene in here. and that'll make sure that it gets mixed properly. Does not smell great, I'll tell you that much. All right, so what I'm gonna do on this microfiber applicator here, actually, sorry, suede applicator, I'm just gonna dab a couple drops on here. Not sure if you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just gonna put a few drops on there. And then I'm just gonna apply it back and forth. Oh man, I love the way this is looking already. If this were a car, I'd be paying a lot more attention to actually doing cross hatching, where I'd go one way and then I'd go another way, and I'd go up and down and I'd go sideways just to make sure I'm getting proper coverage. Since I'm not really working with that great of a surface area here, it's not quite as big of a deal, but you still want to make sure that you cover every square spot. A few more dabs here. You'll notice I didn't do a great job of following my own advice and putting the cap on. But since it's only taking me about 10 seconds per section here, I'm not too worried about it drying out here. Get in all the nooks and crannies, especially the spot here where the cables are touching it. If I wanted to do a really good job, I'd probably actually disconnect the cables beforehand, but I'm not really a very good mechanic, and so I'm worried about getting the cables hooked up again. I don't see any rainbow effect on it yet, but I can't tell if that's just because of the backdrop of the titanium or if it's just not curing yet. All right, so I've kind of been watching for the rainbowing and I'm not really seeing it, which probably means either I'm not giving it enough time or it's just not showing up really well against this titanium surface. So another way you can probably tell if it's done flashing, if you touch it and it's a little tacky, which is it's starting to get a little tacky, that's probably how you know it's a good time to wipe it down. Also, if it looks like it's kind of sweating, that's another way that you know that it's probably about time to wipe it down. Now I mentioned, I don't know if you'll be able to see it very well, but I mentioned I'm not using very much of the bottle. So I did the whole bike, basically all the surfaces. I did the fork, I did the frame. I didn't do the handlebars or the seat post or the derailleurs or anything like that, which I may come back and do later when I'm ready to do a little touch up on it. But I did the whole thing, and you can see I probably used maybe 5 or 10% of this bottle. So the bottle's still good. I'll be able to use it again later on another bike, or I can use it on a car. But I'm gonna go ahead and start wiping down and removing some of that excess oil. Keep in mind, what I'm not doing is I'm not removing any ceramic. The ceramic should be staying, and when I actually wipe down the surface at this point, what I'm wiping down is the excess oil that has separated from the ceramic coating. So Adams actually recommends using a suede towel for this process. Microfibers work about as well. If you're going to use a microfiber though, the recommendation is once you've done it, throw it in the trash, because it does get some crystallized components on there. And if you try to use it on another car or another bike, it may end up scratching the surface. So I'm going to grab a suede towel and I'm going to get to work. All right, so I wiped it all down. You might have noticed I took the lights down, because the next step that I'm going to do is actually I'm using my black light to check to make sure I got everywhere. So it might not show up great on camera, but with the black light you can actually shine it on the surface and you can tell based on what's glowing whether you got it too thick, whether you got it too thin, or not at all. So I can see, like when I look right in here, it's glowing much more than the rest of the bike. And so I didn't wipe it down as good right here. And if you didn't catch this with the UV light and you let it sit for a day or two, these may show, I'm not sure how it'll look on the titanium, but on a dark vehicle it would look kind of like a white spot. And that's not what you're going to want on the paint. So that's why I'm doing this particular step here. I know it's not going to show up on camera, but you can trust me that it's pretty cool. All right, so with the black light, I got most of the high spots down, I think. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to let it sit. I'll come back in an hour or so, make sure I don't see any obvious high spots on there. If I do see any high spots, the best trick at this point that I've learned is to just apply more ceramic coating to that spot, and that'll rehydrate it, and then you can wipe it right off, and that'll take the high spot, and you won't have to do any polishing. If it's a couple hours later or a day later and you find a high spot, you can try rehydrating it with more ceramic, but you're probably going to be stuck using some polish and possibly a buffer to get it off, because it's pretty well set at that point. So I'm gonna give it a little time to cure here. I'll come back in an hour or so, check it out, but I'm really pleased so far with how it looks. I think it really brought out the titanium. It didn't make it like a mirror finish, which was not what I wanted anyways. But it really brought it out, makes it almost look a little more like a gunmetal type gray. And it looks really sharp. So once this is all done, I'll get the wheels and tires put back on, all the accessories back on. One tip is that you don't want to get it wet for about 24 hours while it's curing, and you don't want to wash it again for about another week. So even if you get it dirty, just leave it. I'm not going to be riding it again until this weekend, so I'm probably safe there. But then after a week, you can feel free to wash it. It is a good idea to use like a graphene boost or some type of other ceramic boost that you can use after a couple of weeks or months, just to kind of give it a little jump start every now and then. But this really should last you for quite a while. And I'll check in on the video from time to time and provide any commentary about how I think it's holding up as time progresses. So thanks again for watching, and if I have anything else that I didn't think to mention, I'll cover it in the comments. Thanks.